So elaborate a little on what you said about a broader definition of diversity, not just racial or ethnic diversity, but diversity of thought in many different ways. What do you mean by that?
So we got to the stage in the UK, I guess 3-4 years ago now, where more than 50% of the searches led to placements from people outside of the sports sector. So in the UK, it's a much smaller market. The talent pool's not as broad, it's not as deep. So we had no choice really but to get outside and find those industries who knew what good looks like, and sport wasn't necessarily the best place to look for all of those. That's continued to be the case. So we're doing a big chief digital innovation officer in France right now. We're down to the last 2 candidates. One is doing a big job for the French government in IT and digital, and the other one is running the whole IT piece for French aerospace. Now, and we were quite clear at the outset that it was unlikely to come from sport. We've done a similar job this side of the pond for the Milwaukee Bucks, and the winning candidate came from AT&T, so mobile telecoms. So we were forced that way, I think, as the sector got bigger and bigger and moved up the maturation curve in the UK at least, and most of mainland Europe several years ago. But I think we're starting to see a little bit more of that this side of the pond too.
Is it an easier sales pitch to get somebody who's not in sports to come into sports today than it was 10 years ago?
That's a good question. So we tell our clients all the time, we're in the business of attraction, long before we ever get near recruitment, selection, assessment, evaluation. There's a natural curiosity, isn't there? There's a natural fascination about sports. When we call people up, it's not difficult to get the call. Very often it comes out of the blue and as a kind of a left field option. They follow it, never considered it as a career. So then we've got to make it as attractive as possible and actually describe the business of sports rather than what goes on the field, the court, or the pitch.
I see. But that's the point, right? That you want somebody to come into these sports properties who's got a fresh set of eyes.
Oh,
and is an expert business person, but not necessarily of that world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So now you do searches in the Middle East, Europe, and the US, and I'm really curious to hear how they compare culturally in the boardroom about what they prioritize in what they're looking for.
Yeah, and in Asia. So we were talking earlier, Ben, weren't we? I think in the last 5 years we've done several searches in the Middle East, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and a really tricky one in Japan that we managed to crack. I think cultural experience of the region depends on the region to the way in which this is weighted, but I think experience of the region is one of the main things, if not a real confidence factor in the ability to adapt culturally. There's a language piece to some of it, but the cultural piece, I think, is probably the main thing. Your business culture is very, very different in Hong Kong to Japan. It's very different again in Abu Dhabi. It's very different in China, different in Australia. So cultural I can never say that word. Cultural adaptability, I think, is the key.
Yes, I see.